Hello. In this episode, we are going to discuss financial data sources. Okay. So I prepared a quick summary of this. First, I'll cover some the government provided data sources, and then some private commercial data sources, and then some machine learning data repositories. I think the first one in finance that is useful probably is SEC website. So here I think I gave a link. If you go to sec.gov, and then there is this database called EDGAR. You can, so EDGAR is the online database for the SEC, and public corporations have to submit their financials with the SEC every year, and for many of them every quarter. Okay, so, and what you can do here is that you can look up the company and let's say maybe so the company that we consume a lot of coffee here is here, and then you can see the filings, view the filings, and then you can see there are many different kinds of filings, and maybe someday I should cover that. But 10K is probably the first thing that you might be interested, and for every year you can do it. If you click on it, this gives the annual financials, and starting with the company name, where the company is registered, and where the company is actually located. This is a company where both the registered state and located state are the same. There are also many other things. These days it's HTML tagged. What kind of business it does here, and it will explain in great detail about its company, what kind of risk it faces, what properties it have. Probably starting here, it looks more relevant than what you think about the company's stock performance, okay? Or how the management feels about the company's status. And this is a freestyle description of how the company is doing, how much cash, if they need, or bank borrowing it can have in case of trouble. All these kind of things will be mentioned here. And then the financial statements, of course, will be here too, isn't it? Revenue and all kinds of numbers are tabulated here. There are many other items, but for the sake of time, let me just delegate it to maybe to another session. Another document that probably, well, 10Q is the quarterly. So each year a company files it, but also most of the companies do file every quarter, and it's very similar. It's just shorter, and the company files the financials every quarter. What also is interesting is this DEF 14A. What this is what's sometimes called proxy statement. Each year, the shareholders of Starbucks gather together and vote on various matters, and that's documented here in DEF 14A. So this is the annual shareholder meeting documentation, and it shows many things, who the CEOs are and who the directors are, and any kind of compensation, what kind of board of director committees they have, and the board structures, and yeah, so the compensation table, how much options, stocks awarded. So these kind of things are all in the annual incentive bonus plan. So compensation, corporate governance, usually these kind of things are discussed in fair amount of detail. Also, yeah, so here's a summary table, isn't it? For example, Kevin Johnson, the CEO, as of 2020, got 1.5 million salary and stock awards of 11 million, and so forth. So these are all disclosed here. What's probably more important is here that any kind of incentives, stock-based incentives, they have to be disclosed in here too, isn't it? Or yeah, so the options, any options grants that the directors have been given, including the CEO, when it was granted, what's the exercise price, all these details are being disclosed in here. So anyway, so if you like compensation for the board of director, corporate governance, these kind of issues, those are in the SEC EDGAR DF 14A. Okay? All right. So that's about EDGAR. It is probably doable if you are searching just for one company. But if you have to search for many companies, then perhaps it helps to go through the archives. And this gives the indices each year and quarter for each company, what kind of filings were there, where the web locations are all in here in this. If you type the company IDX and download it, you can download. If you click it, it will download. Okay, and inside here, what you will see is that maybe I should open with an Excel. Open, browse, downloads. It's not an Excel file, so I just open this. What it will give you here is that the company name and what kind of form it is and what's the CIK. CIK is the SEC assigned unique number for each company. And then the date is filed and where the filings are, the location of the website, isn't it? EDGAR data, and this, the text file is in here. And then it will retrieve the files that we have seen before. Okay. Also, for those who are interested in programming, SEC also does provide the instruction for this application programming interface. Usually we call them API, and all the information in here. So if you're interested, that's also there. Okay. So enough for the SEC. So the company's filings are online since 1994. Most of them are there. Online. The old ones, of course, are archived in the paper since 1934. So that's for individual companies. If you need macro data like interest rate, where do you get it? FRED, which is the St. Louis Fed's database, is probably the first source that I look for, FRED, the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. And if you go to categories, there are a whole bunch of categories, isn't it? Interest rates, prices, but probably some of the things that maybe national income products account, like the GDP numbers, you can go for any. See, for example, here, GDP in a quarterly frequency, it's here. You can see it in a plot. You can download it. If you click here, you can download an Excel file. For example, that's GDP, and it downloads. And if you open it, it will give you what series it has and the date. It's since 1947 for the GDP. It's there, isn't it? Okay. So that's for the macro data. So FRED, although the other Federal Reserves also, like Board of Governors, has a website that maintains it. FRED is probably the most popular one that organizes it, the macro data. Interest rate, for example, is another thing that people look at. Let's see. Price index, money banking, interest rates here, isn't it? And something like, I don't know, you heard about LIBOR or treasury bill, isn't it? Secondary market rates, monthly rates. Well, 1 year is probably so here, isn't it? And you can again download it to check it. So many of the macro data are available at Fred. But if you look at and need a little bit more disaggregated data, I think the better source that I tend to look at is BEA, Bureau of Economic Analysis, BEA. And it has a data here by topic, and it has GDP and all this, but what probably is useful is the historical data, not just the current one, but the historical data. And you can navigate industry, international, regional data. For example, at the state level, one could look at the GDP at each state in each year. Let's see. Begin using the data. Quarterly gross domestic product by state, for example, or annual gross domestic product by state. And current dollar is the nominal one, and this is from the real GDP, isn't it? And you can do it for all areas. I guess we shouldn't pull everything that's too large, but in levels, or you can do it percent change. I think levels are probably most people interested in. Let's do all years. And it shows the domestic product for United States as a total, but also in each year since 97. The reason it's 97 is that they're older data too. I think going back to 1960s, but the industry classification changed, and hence how the GDPs are counted changed. So 97 onwards, there is one different way of classifying an industry and counting the GDP. And prior to 97, there's a separate data for it. And you can, of course, download this in an Excel file, for example. And it downloads. And you can look at the data here. Anyway, so these days with the internet, it's very convenient that many of the data are available, readily available. One of the data, though, that I'd like to check other than BEA is the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So here you can get to see unemployment rates, of course, and employment and unemployment, and you can get a whole series of data. Probably the historical data is more interesting. So here, if you look at the historical data, you can have a statewide data or county data, labor force, since 1990. So that dates back fairly long enough. If you look at 2020, for example, here, I downloaded, you can see for each county in 2020, the employed and unemployment rate and all this can be seen. So there's a fair amount of data available on the internet, even for unemployment rate. And also, I think for FRED 2 and BEA 2, but you can, of course, try to access it automatically. And if you look for API in each of these government agency data websites, there usually are some instructions on how to do them. Among the basic data, I think, of course, population is very important. So Census Bureau is where the original source is. And you can explore the data here, but if you want the historical data, search it on Google. But here it gives the National Intercensus Table since 1900. Okay, so Census Bureau's the estimates, even for state, comes every decade, isn't it? 1900, 1910, or 2010, 2020, and so forth. But Census Bureau makes an estimate of in-between years, like 2021, what the estimated total population is in each state and so forth. And so you can see that you can see the estimates are being made here for each state. Okay. Okay, so that is about the macro data and interest rates and these sort of things. Let me just mention some commercial sources. Some of them you generally you don't have access, but if you are in the finance industry and academic institution, the banks and universities do subscribe to certain services that you may have access to. The first thing I would mention is Wharton Research Data Services. I think I ended up here, Wharton Research Data Services. This is sort of like an internet broker, a portal that through which you can subscribe to commercial, your institution will subscribe to commercial data sources, and there are Bordex, Bureau of Fundic, many data sources. You may have heard some of them, FactSet, FINRA, CME, isn't it? There's just so many, it's difficult to mention all of them. But notably, I would mention two, which is CRISP and Compustat. For daily stock prices for commercial database, CRISP is probably the standard database. If you go to CRISP, it's run by University of Chicago Business School, Center for Research and Security Prices, short CRISP. This can be subscribed. It's through Wharton Research Data Services. Okay. Another one is Compustat. And what this is that for each company, the annual filings, of course, individually, you can search it at EDGAR and find out what the assets are, what the liabilities are, and so forth. But if you want to get it for 100 companies and for like 50 different accounting items, it probably is very tedious to manually do it. So Standard & Poor's maintains a database called Compustat, which basically compiles it, and you can download it in an Excel file or other statistical package data formats. Another one, of course, is Bloomberg that you probably heard. The news services also maintains a database for financial data. And there's a Bloomberg terminal. These days it can be online. So if your school subscribes to it, you can access it even on mobile. Right? And there is an API for that too. Like many other data services, you can have a program that accesses it. Among the ones that one can use, that of course you know, will be Yahoo Finance. Okay? And here you can search if you type the ticker, for example, SBUX, the Starbucks Corporation. It shows, of course, the current profile, but if you go to historical data, okay, then you can see the stock prices high and low and close, and adjusting for dividend payouts and all this, and you can download them, of course. So here is the Excel sheet that you can use it in your program. Okay, so and this is fairly handy. Of course, there are APIs for Yahoo, and you can access it through a program as well. So other than these financial data sources, in general, there are also data sources for machine learning, and one of the well-known the repository is UC Irvine maintains a really great, excellent one. Here. And I'm not going to go to individual all the data sources, wine quality, bank marketing, I think even for crime and many other things are in here. You can just search, and if you go here, for example, Iris for the flower, the data. So here's the data folder, and if you type here, the Iris data is here. So if you download it, it's right there for you. Okay. So anyway, so it's a matter of searching. If there are all kinds of data that has been collected by many machine learning and academics and so forth, and it's being deposited. Another one is Kaggle. Maybe you heard about this. Kaggle, it's they maintain an online competition but also because of the competition. They do provide data sets. So, and here are some of great data, even relevant to finance. For example, default, loan default prediction. And you can see here, this data set, and it describes the data. And of course, you can download the whole data here, isn't it? If you click here, you have to sign in for it. So you have to sign in for an account. It's a free account, so you can sign in, and then you'll be able to download. Okay. Finally, I think a popular one is Amazon Web Services. They also maintain a website here. Yeah, so it's very extensive, so I'm not going to go into it, but you can see already some COVID-19 related data sets and all this. But they have in general in all kinds of areas, many different databases that you should explore. Right? So this summarizes the data sources that some of it we will explore in the future episodes. You should also take some time to explore them. Thank you.